Indeed. Dan, do stay with us to discuss further updates from West Asia. Iranian Adviser Ali Larijani called for a joint operations room against Israel, warning that regional countries must take concrete actions or risk enabling further aggression. Larijani said this move would worry the masters, quote, of Israel and force them to change orders. He also criticised Muslim nations for failing to support the Palestinian people and stressed the need for decisive measures to protect the region. The statement comes as Doha hosts an emergency Arab-Islamic summit after Israel strikes on Qatar. Foreign ministers from across the Arab and Islamic world gathered for a high-level preparatory meeting with a draft resolution to be presented to leaders on Monday. Qatar's Prime Minister and their Foreign Minister, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jassim Al Thani, will address delegates, setting the tone for what is expected to be a crucial moment in Middle Eastern regional diplomacy. On the other hand, the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has arrived in Israel to meet Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and discuss escalating Middle East tensions. Dan, we'll have more from this joint Arab summit tomorrow. However, I just want to get your view on Iran's Ali Larijani's statements, and he's called for joint operations against Israel. How seriously do you think Israel views this as a threat? If you could analyse the relationship Iran has with the Gulf, which is of course where these leaders are meeting tomorrow, and what we might expect from that.
I think Israel views Iran as a threat, or more accurately, the Islamic Republic government in Iran as a threat. But I don't think today's statement by Larijani is relevant to very much. And in general, such is the skullduggery of the regional politics in the region, that much of what is said in public, I think, needs to be ignored. Iran is at loggerheads with the Gulf countries, with a possible partial exception of Qatar, which Iran attacked during the 12-day war with Israel, albeit attacking a U.S. base in Qatar. Remember, Qatar, even though it tries to be friends with everyone and has some ties with Iran, also hosts the largest U.S. air base and naval base in the region for thousands of miles around, which is only tens of miles from Iran. And as for the rest of the Sunni countries in the Gulf, and Saudi Arabia and Egypt, I mean, they are enemies of Iran, essentially. And the idea that they would cooperate with Iran against Israel is pretty close to absurd. Moreover, Iran's theocratic regime is guilty of undermining the sovereignty of a wide swath of Arab countries with their proxy militias. I'm talking about Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hezbollah also in Syria during the Assad regime, and the Houthis in Yemen that have caused the deaths of 500,000 Yemenis, and of course Hamas in the Palestinian areas, which has undermined the PA, and the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, which is allied with Iran, which is a terrorist organization declared by the Egyptian government, and of course the Shiite militias backed by Iran in Iraq, which attack U.S. interests in that area and also undermine the sovereignty of Iraq, even though that's complex, since Iraq partly funds them. Iran is absolutely meddling with the Arab world and trying to exploit the current unpleasantness between Israel and Qatar to achieve some benefit, which I don't think will work. That is not to say that tomorrow's event in Doha will be without consequences, because Qatar is really angry at the violation of its sovereignty, which is indisputable, that Israel did. But in a broader sense, there's a big mystery around that issue, because if we are to believe the public posture of the U.S., that claims that they were not complicit in and acquiescent to the Israeli missile strike from the Red Sea last week on the Hamas meeting in Doha, well, that would mean that Israel took a gamble so reckless with upsetting the U.S., its main patron without whom it cannot continue the war in Gaza, that it is literally unbelievable. So my suspicion is that the U.S. is lying. And therefore there's a big pretense happening in the region right now, and people are going through emotions. I could be wrong, and we'll know more, I suppose, perhaps after the Rubio meetings in Israel, and indeed after the Doha conference, I would expect these countries, which have been at loggerheads with Qatar for parts of the past decade over Qatar's support for the Muslim Brotherhood, to issue statements, declarations, maybe threaten again to establish an Arab NATO type superstructure, which doesn't seem to me to be realistic, but it would be a signal that they're very unhappy. I could also envision the UAE taking some steps like returning their ambassador from Israel, or maybe even announcing a re-examination of the peace treaty with Israel. But my sense is somehow they're going to find a way to be pro forma with their protestations, but get over it. To a degree, Qatar can see this as a win because Israel can't do it again. Given the
Yes.
wall-to-wall condemnation, I think it was one and done, and now it's, even though Israel thinks the immunity of Hamas leaders in Qatar has been shattered, in fact, it might have been reinforced.
Yes, Dan, do stay with us to discuss further updates coming out of Israel now.